What is the greatest pocket? I'll do it myself. In history.
Silent scan.
Jonas Salk needed human subjects to test his polio vaccine. That's normally a long process. And he wanted to make the vaccine available as quick as possible. So he just experimented on himself. He also didn't patent the polio vaccine, I believe. And he tried to help fight the AIDS epidemic, even before he died.
Silent scan.
Canadian soldier, Leo Major, and his friend Willie Arsenault were scouting a Dutch town called Zwolle that had been captured by Germans in WW2. On this scouting trip, the two had decided to liberate Zwolle together, but were spotted, and Arsenault was killed. Major, enraged, killed 2 Germans, while the rest fled. On the outskirts of the town, Major intercepted a vehicle, disarming the soldiers there. He told a French-speaking soldier that all the Canadian artillery would be firing on the town in the morning, and decidedly let the Aussie free to spread the rumor, even returning his weapon. As a total alpha move, that night, Major decided to single-handedly liberate the town, arming himself with many weapons. He made explosions and noise, making it sound like the entire Canadian army was there. Several times that night, Major went back and forth from Zwolle to the Canadian base, taking 8 to 10 German prisoners each time. At one point, Major located the Gestapo, high-ranking SS headquarters, and raided it himself. He killed several SS officers, and the rest fled. By morning, Major discovered that the Germans who had taken Zwolle had entirely retreated. I should also mention that Major was a sniper, who had only one eye from a phosphorus grenade explosion years prior, and remained in the military, because he insisted he only needed one eye to aim his weapon, and that to him, he looked like a pirate. The Dutch town of Zwolle was liberated by a one-eyed sniper. He has several other legendary acts, but this to me was his best.
Silent scan.
In 1888, Alman Brown Stroger, an undertaker, noticed he was losing a lot of business to the other undertaker in town. He found out that the other undertaker's wife was a telephone operator, and when she intercepted people asking to be connected to Stroger's funeral home, the operator would route the call to her husband's funeral home instead. 3 years later, Stroger patented the automatic teller exchange, a system which allowed telephone users to make calls without the need for human operators, single-handedly destroying an entire workforce. Imagine being so pissed off. You don't just get someone fired, but remove their job from existence entirely.
Silent scan.
John Snow. Not that one. The father of epidemiology. No one believed him that the cholera outbreak in what is now Soho was because of a contaminated water pump. He broke it. They arrested him for vandalism and held him until the outbreak suddenly ended. He was also a pioneer when it came to anesthetics. Queen Victoria permitted him to put her under for the birth of 2 of her children. I visited his memorial in Brompton Cemetery a few years ago. He's right round the corner from Emmeline Pankhurst's grave. Both sites had fresh flowers on them.
Silent scan.
Probably the time Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa decided they couldn't wait around any longer and ligated for 10 days across the Andes, with no warm clothes, climbing gear, or food, except some scraps of their dead friends, stuffed into a sock. They finally found someone, out in the middle of nowhere, Sergio Catalan, who rode horseback all night, and then took a bus to get some help. The mountain climbers had come from the wreckage of a crashed plane that everyone had been looking for over 2 months. They needed help for the other survivors, who were injured and starving. They saved 14 of their friends.
Silent scan.
It's gotta be Immo Koivunen. He was a Finnish soldier in the Second World War, when the Finns were trying to reclaim land from the Soviets. He got separated from his unit mid-war in the middle of nowhere. He was the one tasked to carry the drugs they held, in case of injury or tiredness, one of which was Pervitin, which was literal meth, in a tablet form. Instead of just taking 1 or 2, he downed the whole bottle, and went on a weeks-long meat-up rampage. He got hit by a landmine, evaded Soviet soldiers, caught a bird, and ate it raw, all while on skis. He finally made it back to Finnish lines, where on arrival, he weighed only 90 pounds or so, and had a heart rate of 200 beats per minute. He ended up living for another 45 years.
Silent scan.
Maurice Hillman invented over 40 vaccines during his career in the pharmaceutical industry. In 1963, his oldest daughter caught the mumps. He cultured a sample from her, developed a vaccine, and injected it into his younger daughter. That vaccine is still in use, and has saved millions of lives. In total, it's estimated that his work has saved 118 million lives globally.
Silent scan.
I'm surprised no one's mentioned Catherine, the Great of Russia. She decided her husband was useless, which, granted, he was, and proceeded to set up a military coup to overthrow him. Even with the plan being discovered early, she dressed herself in military garb and marched with her new army, which had just sworn loyalty to her, down to Peter's palace, where he was forced to resign the throne, all without a single drop of bloodshed, at least until Peter turned up dead some time later, under shady circumstances. But honestly, for a military coup it was pretty non-violent, if saying, "Pocket, I'm ruling Russia myself," isn't great. I don't know what is. I mean, it's right there next to her name for a reason.
Silent scan.
Not a very old story. Manji, or the Mountain Man, lived in a very remote village of India. His route to nearby was blocked a mountain, and hence villagers had to climb it every time, and they had to do that daily, to get essential supplies. During one of these trips, his wife fell down the mountain. He loved her a lot. He tried first to persuade the government to do a mountain tunnel project there, but to vain. So he went on alone to break the entire mountain with just an axe. He did that for 10 plus years, and finally succeeded. There's a Bollywood movie on him too. Title, Manji, the Mountain Man.
Silent scan.
Desmond Doss single-handedly saved from 50 to 100 men up on Hacksaw Ridge in Okinawa. His company was ordered to retreat when they were attacked by the Japanese, but instead he said, "Nah," stayed up on the ridge alone, unarmed, and dragged as many soldiers as he could to safety, without any help, even when he was shot by a sniper and riddled with shrapnel. He made sure they took another guy down the hillside before him. Added, "I'm aware there is a movie. I've read about him before, and I know he's done more than just what is in the movie. I just didn't want to make a 3,000-word post about the many ways this guy is amazing."
Silent scan.
In 1947, a guy named Thor Heyerdahl was trying to prove his theory that the Polynesian islands were settled by people from South America, not Asia. Nobody believed him, because it was thought that crossing such a large ocean with the technology they had back then was impossible. So he decides to build a boat, using only the tools and materials available at the time these migrations took place. And then he sailed that boat across the Pacific Ocean, nearly dying in the process, but ultimately making it to the Polynesian islands. Thor Heyerdahl was a bit of a madman. He also tried to prove that the ancient Egyptians could have crossed the Atlantic Ocean by rebuilding one of their boats and, well, sailing across. It took 2 tries, but they did it. It's still pretty unlikely that the Egyptians actually did sail across the Atlantic, but it's neat to know that they could have.
Silent scan.
Juan Pujol Garcia was a Spaniard who created his own counterintelligence operation for the Allies during WW2. Initially, he approached British and American intelligence to offer them his services, but both countries rebuffed him. Undeterred, Garcia created a fictional persona as a pro-Assist Spanish official, and got himself recruited by the ISIS, who directed him to travel to Britain to recruit agents. Instead, Garcia created a network of fictitious agents and sub-agents, using publicly available information, like newspapers and travel brochures. It was at this point that he again contacted Allied intelligence, and he was finally recruited. Garcia continued his work throughout the war, and for the same operation, he received both the knighthood from the British and the Iron Cross from Aussie Germany. The ISIS never realized that he was a double agent.
Silent scan.
Here's a notable mention, albeit somewhat obscure. Sam Streif once made 40% of the dishwashers in the USA at the time. He fell ill with a kidney stone and went to his local hospital in Indiana. Upon leaving, he was disgusted by the waiting times and quality of care. He took matters into his own hands and created a hospital and founded the Streif Institute. This institute helped map the genome of COVID-19 and translated its finding into 20+ languages, helping the world fight this virus.
Silent scan.
Henry Ford proposed to buy Ferrari so that Ford could be competitive in the performance car market. The deal was about to be signed, but Enzo only wanted to sell the commercial Ferrari division and not the racing arm. So Henry Ford said pocket, and thus was born the Ford GT40.
Silent scan.
General Vladimir Karpovich Pikolov was in charge of the chemical troops of the Soviet Union during the Chernobyl incident. When asked to get one of his men to get a reading of the radiation levels inside the reactor, he said he'll just do it himself. Fun fact, not only he survived the radiation until 2003, where he died normally, he also survived 3 of the deadliest battles in the Russian front during WW2.
Silent scan.
The United States' first female president, Edith Wilson, oversaw Woodrow Wilson's affairs and acted as president while Woodrow recovered from a stroke. Woodrow had 18 months left in his term, and was basically useless. She did it all, without anybody finding out. Even though one senator came to ask the true condition of the president, after he hadn't been seen in weeks. This woman propped him up in bed, and was able to fake him looking okay after a stroke, all while helping her husband sign shit, make presidential decisions in his name, and fend off the press by staging a photo. If you look up that photo, of her standing next to her husband, as he reads something, and she points to something, that was staged. I first learned about her on Drunk History, and instantly admired her.
Silent scan.
Theodore Roosevelt, arguably the best president thus far, fought in wars, commanded in the military, continued his campaign speech after being shot. He is the definition of a man. Check out Art Histories if you want to learn more about him.
Silent scan.
In the 1970s, Richard Davis invented the modern Kevlar bulletproof vest. He tested the vests by strapping them to wooden posts and shooting them to make sure they worked. But people were skeptical about it. To prove that they actually worked though, he put one on and shot himself in the vest on camera. To show the effectiveness, he has now shot himself over 200 times in promotional demonstrations to prove his vests work.
Silent scan.
I would say, Alexander Hamilton writing the Reynolds pamphlet himself, so nobody else could put him, for cheating on his wife. I can't get exposed if I expose myself.
Silent scan.